Today's guest is someone really special to me. It's Elaine Halligan from the Parent Practice. Elaine was actually my parenting coach when I first started out on this journey, and so much of what I teach and believe today was shaped by her guidance and support. So Elaine, welcome to the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And I would love to start if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a parent coach.
Sure, but I have to say, how exciting is it for me to have a client who I have inspired to set up their own parenting business? So just a big congratulations to you, Keras. Yes,
Thank you.
I am a parenting coach. I'm an author. I'm a speaker. But look, most importantly, I'm mum. and I'm mum to two adult children, Sam, aged 30, and Izzy, aged 26. And I have to kind of pinch myself when I realise how long I've been doing this work for. How did I come into this work? Quick story short, I had a child who was differently wired. We didn't understand his needs. And the shocking story is he was excluded from 3 schools in so many years. So by the age of 7, he was literally written off in society. As parents, we were absolutely in crisis, Keras. And, I put my hand up and I say, I found parenting the hardest, most demanding, exhausting, bewildering job I've ever done because my son was differently wired. He is not neurotypical. And so then the journey started, which is how can we help him? And to cut a long story short, he became known as the alphabet kid. He had loads and loads of kind of what I call TLAs, 3-letter abbreviations. And those, everything from autistic spectrum to ADHD to dyslexia to sensory processing disorder, you name it, he had it. And I just said, whoa, stop. I just sensed that I had a little boy who was like a rock covered in mud. And I just knew if I wiped back that mud, I thought we were going to find something spectacular. And indeed, we ended up finding the sparkling diamond. And the story is that he got back into school, having been excluded so many times, ended up as head boy, and is now, a real entrepreneur because he has got that entrepreneurial profile of dyslexia and ADHD. And that is how I came into parenting work, because the biggest piece of the jigsaw puzzle was actually the positive parenting piece. It was actually knowing how to communicate and connect with him without having to, and see how many of your listeners are nodding at this point, without having to nag, repeat, remind, what else do we do? Cajole, bribe, threaten, and eventually I ended up screaming like a banshee and didn't recognize myself. So in order to get the jigsaw puzzle together and to unlock all the potential our wonderful boy had, I knew I firstly needed to understand what his needs were, neurologically, academically, and then we needed the parenting toolkit. And it was the parenting toolkit that it caused the magic to happen.
God, it's such an incredible story. And like you say, I think so many parents are nodding along as they listen to that. And obviously, as you and I know, myself included, because I came to you probably 4 or 5 years ago with my eldest, and he's got dyslexia and dyspraxia. And we kind of unpacked together, didn't we? A lot of those neurodiverse traits and some of the things I was struggling with, and that, trying to learn to regulate myself and tackle these really challenging moments so that I could bring out the best in him and I could parent from a calmer place and see all the things that he had to offer. And I actually always remember you explaining to me how some children are daffodils and some are orchids. And that really sat with me because I think that's such a beautiful way of explaining how some children do naturally take a bit more nurturing. And for me, my eldest was definitely that child. And especially being a first-time parent, I just felt so lost. And I think that's a really common problem, isn't it? So it's really important that we are kind of finding ways to upskill ourselves to have that toolkit. So even though it doesn't always work in those moments, it's having something to fall back on that you can use and try.
But you've mentioned a really important point there, because in order to bring out the best in your little boy, you firstly needed to understand what his needs were, and you discovered that he had a specific learning difficulty, dyslexia. Plus he had the dyspraxia or development coordination disorder. But there's something else you mentioned, dandelion and orchid, that's a completely different thing. That's about temperament. Now, temperament is kind of nature. It's how you're born. And so the orchid dandelion analogy you just referred to is the idea that some children are dandelions. They're robust, they're resilient. What happens to a dandelion if you knock it down? It just reseeds and regrows. And if you've got a dandelion child, lucky you, because it is just luck. But some children are born with an inborn temperament that's more of an orchid. And the orchid child is more sensitive, not quite as robust, and needs a really careful greenhouse impact. But if we know anything about orchids, it's the orchids that end up being spectacular. Yeah, but they need the right environment. So you've hit on something really important, because parenting is so complex. It's not just about getting the parenting piece right. It's about understanding your child's temperament, and it's about understanding their needs. And that's where the knowledge comes in. So I am really keen on kind of early assessment, early diagnosis, if there is anything worrying a parent. And I get a lot of parents coming to me, Karis, who say, I just sensed something wasn't quite right. But when I spoke to the teachers at school, they would say, oh, don't be silly, he's just a boy. Yeah. He's only 4, he'll develop out of it. But deep down, parents need to trust their gut. And if something's not quite right, I would implore all parents just to be brave and courageous enough and just to do a little bit of exploration.
I think you're so right. I think you do often know, don't you? You have an instinct. And that's certainly how I remember feeling, that things just didn't seem the same as everyone else that I was spending time with. And I just needed to get to the bottom of that. And I'm also kind of all for that early diagnosis and labeling, because I think it's about that understanding piece. And I think when you understand, it's much easier to be empathetic and to be able to give your child specifically what they need, because as we've just discovered, they're all different. And sometimes you think you want to parent how you want to parent, but really you need to learn how to parent how that child needs you to parent and interprets information. And that's a big thing as well.
And labeling, and you use the word labeling, and that's an interesting term, because a lot of parents say to me, I don't want to get a diagnosis because I don't want to label my child. And I would say it's not about labeling. It's about understanding who your child is.
I agree.
It's accepting the child you've got and not the child you may want them to be. So, you came to me early in the journey, and that early kind of insight that you had, I promise you, it's the greatest gift you can give your son.
So true. So why is it so important then to understand a child's feelings when dealing with their behaviour?
Feelings, okay. So very simply, how a child feels impacts what they do. And what a child does impacts how they feel. So feelings and emotions, I think, are at the heart of kind of positive parenting, because positive parenting is all about connection and communication. And if we think about it, most children's behavior, if it's negative behavior, if it's misbehavior, I promise you, is generated by feelings. And it's often those feelings that are overwhelming them that they can't even begin to articulate. They can't put it into words. So we as parents, it's vital that we are what we call a child's emotional coach. So it's our job to teach them kind of emotional intelligence and EQ. And Karis, all the research tells us that, EQ is probably more important than IQ if you're evaluating, and I kind of put this word in inverted commas, success. And I kind of hesitate when I use the word success because it means different things to all of us. But if we're thinking about hopefully having our children live a confident, happy, contented life, fulfilling, their strengths, maximizing their strengths, if that's what success looks like to you, the most successful people have good emotional intelligence. And that is why it's so important to spend time listening and validating your children's feelings in order to help them have a higher emotional quotient.
That's powerful, isn't it? To think that is being shown, research is showing that emotional intelligence really does hold that much weight, really, in how we move forward in life.
Absolutely. And maybe it would help your listeners if I gave a quick example of how it works.
I would love that.
Yeah, should we do that? So I'm going to use you as my guinea pig, Karis, if that's all right. Typical scenario here, and I'm sure you've had it with Hunter. Mummy, I don't want to go to school today.
Yes,
how
many times.
Without knowing any of the skills, how would we normally respond to that?
It's very easy to say something like, oh, yes, you do. You'll have a great day when you get there. It's your favourite lunch today. And you know your best buddy's going to be there. You'll have fun.
Yeah, exactly. So when our child tries to share with us something we're feeling and we don't want to hear it because we're rushing out the door to work, we
Yeah.
just want to put a sticky plaster over it. And you've given a brilliant example, because what we do is we reassure, we kind of advise them, we even deny and dismiss their feeling and tell them, you're wrong to feel like that. You love school. You had a great time there yesterday. And we do all these things that, whilst inherently are not wrong, I don't want any parent listening to this thinking they're doing it wrong. It's just not going to be effective. So when we reassure or tell them everything's going to be fine, or it's swimming today, it's your favorite sport, or even we ask questions, why don't you want to go to school? And I promise you, most children will not know why. They'll just go because. Or they'll
Yeah.
make up an excuse, my tummy hurts. And then if we're really getting a bit irritable and our buttons are getting pressed, we'll philosophize and we'll say, well, look, this is just tough. This is life. Let me tell you, son, you have to do things that you may not like to do. I don't want to go to work today, but I have to do it. This is tough, so just man up.
That's usually my husband steps in with that lecture.
But there are lots of people who go out there and philosophize. What a child hears in that conversation is, my mummy's not listening to me. My mummy doesn't get it. My mummy doesn't understand me. I've just said to her, I don't want to go to school, and she's just dismissed and denied my feelings. So one of two things will happen. Either they'll get angrier as they get that you're not listening and they just dig their feet in, or they'll withdraw and they won't talk to you again. And actually, as time goes on into the teenage years, they will stop sharing with you things because they know or feel that they perceive that you're not going to listen.
Gosh. So how do we tackle this? What should we be saying?
So the mantra here is a takeaway for your listeners, is you need to, as Dan Siegel says, I don't know whether you know Dan Siegel, I'm sure it's in that bookcase behind you, The Whole Brain Child.
Yes.
He says, name the feeling to tame it.
Mm-hmm.
Name it to tame it. That's a wonderful mantra. So we just need to validate feelings. And if your child says to you, I don't want to go to school today, you need to stop and pause. Press a pause button. And you're not going to problem solve at all. You are literally just going to name the feeling and listen to him. So for you to say you don't want to go to school today, and I can tell by the look on your face, something's bothering you, and I don't know what it is, but I can tell you're feeling a little sad today. I'm going to make a guess, and I may get it wrong. I'm sure you'll tell me, but maybe it's because maybe you don't feel right about me spending time with a new baby at home, and maybe you're needing a little bit more time with me, and you'd rather be at home playing with me and your new baby sister. I don't know, but something's telling me something's not quite right. Now, if you guess wrong, I promise you your child will tell you.
Yeah.
No, don't be silly. Don't be silly. It's not that. It's swimming today and I hate swimming. Bingo. Now we're opening up a conversation. Yeah?
Right.
You don't like swimming. Oh, yes, I remember. Last time you had your swimming lesson on a Friday, Mrs. Smith shouted at you, and I think you came home and told me about how uncomfortable that was and how embarrassing it was. Zip your lip. Don't give advice. And the tendency for parents is to say, well, I know you don't like swimming, but you've got no choice. You have to do it. And as soon as you use the but, you negate all the listening you've done. So what you're trying to do is bring your child out of what we call hot brain. So there's two parts to the brain. Prefrontal cortex. If you're talking to a child, you can call it cool brain. If you stick your fingers in your ears like this, that's the amygdala or the limbic system. Let's call it hot brain. And if your child's in hot brain because they're overwhelmed by feelings and emotions, guess what? This bit of the brain here, which is the rational, logical thinking part, can't operate very well. So there's no point problem solving until you've calmed them down. And you calm them down by validating their feelings, by saying, yeah, I can understand why you're feeling a bit nervous. Mrs. Smith wasn't very nice to you last week, and I know you felt embarrassed when she shouted at you in front of all the other children. Yes, she did, and I don't want and I hate her. So as you calm him down, then you can go into problem solving, which sounds like this. I'm wondering what we can do to ensure this doesn't happen again. And together, you problem solve, And but what the problem we have is that we offer advice and problem solve too quickly. You need to calm your child down first before you problem solve. And as I'm talking about this skill, I do our webinars on this topic. It is the most anti-intuitive topic that I deliver within my positive parenting program. So it's many of your listeners may be sitting there and go, well, my mum and dad didn't do that to me, or that feels really weird, or doesn't that take too much time?
We have this desire to fix, don't we, as parents, rather than listen?
Yes. We always want to put a sticky plaster over it. And then the mantra to use here is you need to connect first. You need to spend time connecting before you correct behavior.
Yeah, connect before you redirect. That's Daniel Siegel as well, isn't it?
Daniel Siegel, connect before you redirect. Okay, connect before you correct is my saying, yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that's some really great advice there. And especially around the problem solving as well. That's definitely something else that I remember learning from you in parent coaching is when we allow the children to come up with solutions, they're way more receptive, aren't they, to want to actually follow through on it rather than if we come up with the solutions to the problem.
That's a really good point. They are more receptive if it's come from them. But there's another reason as well why it's good to encourage them to come up with solutions, because everything about our job as parents, I believe, it is to help our children be independent and self-reliant. And when I'm teaching parenting class, I often say to parents, this is going to sound a bit uncomfortable for you, but your job is to prepare for separation. And they all go, oh my goodness, I've only got 3 years. But your job is to raise a competent adult. And in doing that, they need to be independent and self-reliant. So getting them, Karis, to do their own thinking is probably one of the most valuable tools you can do within the home. So instead of telling them what the solution is, we say to them, hey, you've got a good head on your shoulders. You've got a good brain there. What are your ideas about how we can solve this? You need to listen. It even helps to take a little notebook and a pen and write it down. Yeah?
Yeah.
You can show them you're taking it seriously, and together you problem solve. And if we're honest about it, that is what life's all about. Life presents curveballs all the time. And if you think about my story with my 7-year-old, one of the key phrases we can have had in the house that we used a lot of is, what's the solution to that? What's the strategy to that? How are you going to problem solve? And what I can assure you is that this stuff works, because age 17, my son suddenly was an adventurer and decided to do something called the Mongol Rally. I don't know whether any of your listeners have heard of that. It's mad. It's a 18,500 kilometer trek from London to Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia.
Gosh.
And he did it in a 1.2 litre Skoda. And I tell you, in order to be able to do something like that, age 17, I couldn't do it age 60, you need to be a problem solver. And I really think we altered his mindset by letting him know that he could find solutions to things. So from a very early age, he was changing car tires, interested in car engines. He would be very proactive, and we encouraged it. And then that's, allow your child to take risks, allow them to do things that may be outside the norm.
It's how we build resilience.
I digress there, sorry.
No, I love it. It all plays a part, doesn't it? All these things play into the role of parenting and who they become. One of the things in our time together that you taught me about, which again really plays a part in my parenting, is positive reinforcement. So can you just explain the role of it and how it does shape behaviour?
And so when you say positive reinforcement, are you referring to descriptive praise, reinforcing good behaviour?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how can I quickly explain this? Okay, most of us as parents have, and although it's a bit uncomfortable to hear this, we have a negativity bias.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Your son comes in from school. Let's say he hangs his coat up, but he dumps his shoes and his book bag in the middle of the kitchen floor, perfect for you to trip over. What do we normally say in that situation?
We'd normally probably holler something from the kitchen because we're busy cooking dinner to pick up those bag and shoes and put them away because someone's going to trip over them.
Sam, how many times do I have to tell you? Your shoes don't live in the middle of the floor. So We all have what's called a negativity bias, whether we like to admit it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Another example, we may have a child who we think or perceive or know to be a fussy eater. So immediately they may sit down at the dinner table, they may have washed their hands, they may be sitting with their bottom on the chair, 4 legs may be on the floor, they may have even tried a green bean. But the minute they go, ugh, I hate green beans, we're on it like a bonnet.
Yeah.
Well, we are hardwired to notice the behavior we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of our brain called the reticular activating system, and it is programmed to look for evidence to support our theory. So if we think we've got a fussy eater, we'll comment on all the things that prove she's a fussy eater. If we think we've got a boy who's disorganized, yeah, we will comment and spend time on saying, pick up your shoes and your book bag. But positive reinforcement means we need to spend more time as parents in the first step of this, commenting and noticing on the positive behavior. So in the 2 examples I gave, it would sound like this. Hey, Sam, look at you. You've already hung your coat up. You did that immediately on coming in from school. I didn't even have to prompt you. So let me tell you, you've done one of the 3 things you need to do when you come in from school. I wonder which thing you're going to do next. And you smile. Now, you may get a child going, I don't know. And you go, this is where we get them to do their own thinking. And we go, yeah, you may not remember, you may have forgotten. So have a look at the little chart, the rules chart. What comes next after you've hung your coat up? Because you did that without any fuss. You're a boy who's getting into really good habits and behaviors. So I wonder what you're going to do next. So can you see how positive that is? You're reinforcing the good behavior, but we're not spending an enormity on the bad behavior, but we aren't going to ignore it. We are going to get them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go, I wonder which one you're going to do next. And before you know it, your child is probably going, oh my God, yeah, okay, I need to put my shoes in the shoebox.
Yeah.
And the example of the fussy eater, hey, look at you, Susie. You've washed your hands without me asking. You're sitting with your bottom on the chair and all 4 chair legs are on the floor. Looks as if you're in the right place to start the evening meal. I wonder which thing you're going to try first. That is positive reinforcement rather than, come on, please, will you eat up and don't complain about your food?
Mm-hmm. And you always give these wonderful examples, Elaine, of describing what we see. And I think that's really key for any listeners if they're wondering how exactly to do it. You describe in detail what you see, so that there's 4 chair legs on the floor, you sat with your bottom on the chair, you've washed your hands and you're ready to eat. And that description is really good for our children to hear, isn't it, of all the things that they have done right, because that's really good for their self-esteem and their confidence as well.
It is, as long as we are descriptive. And actually, in the examples I gave, they're not quite descriptive enough. So it is really important to praise, but to praise specifically and evidence-based. You see, most of us, Karis, in society praise generically.
Yes.
So if I praise you generically and just say, hey, I think you're doing an incredible job with your new podcast. Yeah. How do you take that praise?
It just doesn't hold much weight, does it? Because you feel like, okay, good job. Like lots of people say that, we say it all the time, that we kind of zone it out.
Yeah, so it's a bit generic, it's non-specific. You may not even believe it. But if I say, Karis, we haven't spoken for a wee while, I knew you'd set up this podcast, but by God, you're resilient. You were like a bulldog with a bone. When I kept saying I couldn't do it, I didn't have enough time in my schedule, I'm sorry, I can't come to the studio, you didn't give up. You did not give up. You kept knocking on my door. And what does that tell me about you? It tells me you're determined. It tells me you are resilient. It tells me you are focused. And there's something about that character trait of not giving up and just keeping going that I admire hugely. And that is what's going to make your podcast, Parenting Unplugged, a successful one. So I've just
You're incredibly good at that. I remember how amazingly skilled at that you are from our coaching together, and I really took that away from our coaching together to practice that skill with my children.
So
and my God,
descriptive
the difference
praise.
of how it makes people feel is phenomenal.
How does it make you feel?
It makes you feel good. It makes you feel electric. You feel validated. You feel seen and heard, because I feel like you've acknowledged the things that were done quietly that you almost didn't realize that you were acknowledging. And the fact that you described character traits gives me validation and self-worth.
Now, if that sentence I just gave has that impact on you aged, I don't know, mid-30s or whatever. I almost got it right. Can you imagine the impact it has on the growing souls of our children?
Yeah.
So we need to move away from the good boy, good girl, well done, you're amazing, you're a superstar, because that kind of praise, whilst it may work with a preschooler, as your children get a bit more aware and a bit more savvy, they will throw that back at you.
Yeah.
And they'll
Especially if they don't believe it themselves, do they? If we were to say, great picture, and they didn't think it was a good picture, it can completely backfire on us as well.
Yeah, and they'll say things like, well, you're just saying that because you're my mum, and it's kind of a waste of breath because we're not getting the impact we need. So all our praise needs to be specific and evidence-based. So let's say you're struggling with a child getting dressed in the morning, and you come in and they've only got their pants and their socks on. Most of us with that negativity bias would go, oh, come on, Sam. How many times do I have to tell you? You're going to be late for school unless you get dressed quickly. So the descriptive praise would be, hey, wow, look at you. You've already got 2 of the 5 things on you need to do to get ready for school. And you did it independently without asking me or Daddy for any help. That's really mature and sensible. I wonder which thing you're going to put on next. So what we're doing is we're weaving into our praise any effort they're making. We're acknowledging 2 out of 5. Any improvement. Wow, that's an improvement on yesterday when I came in and you were still in your pajamas. We praise for progress, improvement, effort, attitude, qualities and characteristics. And that is key. So let's say a child helps you from the car with the shopping. I'm just going to give a quick bit of praise and just say, hey, that was really thoughtful of you. I never asked you to help me and you did it without any fuss. It's lovely when you're thinking about other people. It means you're thinking about the world outside your own. You're a very kind, thoughtful little boy.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly powerful. And I think, as you said earlier, we need to kind of be aware of, as you mentioned, our reticular activator. When I learned about that, it really made sense because if we use, say, cars, for example, we've all been in that situation, haven't we? That you suddenly start looking at a new BMW, for example, and then you see them everywhere. And that's exactly what the reticular activator is designed to do. When we think about something and we bring it to our conscious mind, then we do start seeing it. So that's how the negativity bias works, doesn't it? If we're looking for bad behavior, we're going to find it. Whereas if we can make those mind shift changes and start looking for the good that our children have done, you will also find it. And then that's when we can start to really describe, as you're explaining, what it is that they've done. And that in itself can really reduce down some behaviors that we can see in our children, can't it? Because of how they feel validated, seen and heard.
Spot on. I couldn't have described it better myself. You absolutely nailed that. We need, as parents, to spend time on the good behavior. So most parents come to me saying, I want to manage the misbehavior. I want to manage the sibling rivalry. My child never listens to me, blah, blah, blah. And they think they've got a problem with the bad behavior or the misbehavior. Almost all parents, the issue they've got is actually with the good behavior in terms of them not noticing it. So the first place to start, and this is for all your listeners, descriptive praise is the first place to start because it is the greatest motivator. And at the heart of descriptive praise is the idea that we're going to raise self-esteem. Now, when a child feels good about themselves, guess what? They tend to be more cooperative. And what's really fascinating here is I would say that undoubtedly almost 100% of my clients who come to me have the same issue within the family home. My child doesn't listen to me. And if a child's not listening, we end up nagging, repeating, reminding, and then eventually raising our voice. If we can get a child to be cooperative and we never have to ask them 2, 3, 4 times to do things, I tell you what, it creates so much harmony at home. And descriptive praise is the greatest motivator to a cooperative, confident, competent child.
So, Elaine, I wanted to ask you to talk about the Golden Book, because this is something that you taught me about all those years ago, and it's something I still use today. And I really want to promote the Golden Book because I think it's one of the best tools in parenting that you will ever come across. So I'm going to let you explain it because obviously you're the one who taught it to me all those years ago.
Lovely. And it is a really simple takeaway. Just take a book. I've got my diary here, an A5 size, perfect. Buy one book for each child. We can call it the golden book, the praise book, the good book, whatever. And in this book, you're going to write 3 to 5 descriptive praises every day for each child. And the idea is twofold. One, as you write in the golden book, you get to the end of the evening and you can do it as part of your bedtime routine. After you've read your bedtime story to your child, you can take the golden book and read it to them. And the idea is their head hits the pillow. They hear all these wonderful descriptive praises. Yeah, thank you for being brave and courageous today, going to the swimming lesson when I know you didn't want to go. Ah, you were very kind and thoughtful. You took your plate from this table to the dishwasher without me asking you to. So fill the book with descriptive praises, read it to your child at bedtime, and just watch their self-esteem grow. But there is another reason the Golden Book's really helpful. When I deliver this new skill of descriptive praise to a lot of parents, they kind of, some of them think it's like a foreign language.
Mm-hmm.
I never had parents who spoke to me like this. I do praise, but I've never praised in that detail before. So by writing it in the Golden Book, it acts as an aid memoir for both you, your husband, your partner, whoever's parenting the children. So it's a really important habit to get into. And I promise you, you will see the results almost instantaneously. If
Yeah.
you stop doing the Golden Book and your child suddenly goes, "You haven't written in the Golden Book, Mummy," you know it's working. You know it's working. They're asking for it because that praise you give them, and writing it in indelible ink is really impactful because you can go back and refer back to it. So yes, the Golden Book, descriptive praise, is one of the greatest motivators.
And you talked about the point there that I think is really key as well. I know for me, when I started learning to descriptive praise the kids like this, I found it really alien and I felt like I was almost speaking a foreign language. So I found it really useful to write it in the book, and it helped me think about the sorts of things that I could say.
Mm.
And I kind of realized in the early days that I could constantly be more descriptive, and it helped with that process for it to become more natural. And exactly as you say, when I go through little spells when we don't write the book because we lose a bit of routine over the holidays, the kids will always ask for it back. They absolutely love it, and they go to bed feeling really thrilled with themselves.
It is lovely, isn't it? And guess who else can give descriptive praise to? Not just the children.
My husband.
Yeah, yeah. We all need descriptive praise. So I have some
You
clients
can give
who
it to anyone, can't you? It's a great form of communication.
anyone, but if you think about it, most of the interaction between partners, husband, wives, whatever, at home,
Hmm.
there's a lot of instructions being given. Have you done this?
Hmm.
Have you done that? Who's putting the bins out? Have you got this in your diary? To give some feedback in the form of descriptive praise, it really, really strengthens relationship
Hmm.
quality. So all of us
It
should be
does.
doing it.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why, as I say, for me, it's something I really wanted to get you on the podcast to talk about, because I just know, I feel like of all the parenting tips that I've learned over the years, and there's been many that I practice daily, but that is one that has really stuck with me. And I would say has single-handedly changed the trajectory of my parenting. And as you say, even my relationships, because I do indeed use descriptive praise in the way that I communicate with the vast majority of people. So it is very effective.
It's the biggest secret, isn't it, in life?
Yeah.
The biggest secret, how to connect and communicate.
So, can you explain to me what a growth mindset is and how parents can encourage a growth mindset in young children through the way that we praise and speak to them? Because obviously we've talked about praise now and descriptive praise, but why is it so important for our mindset? Explain the term the growth mindset.
Wow, that's a big question. So, the word mindset, it comes from a researcher from Stanford University called Carol Dweck.
Hmm.
And a mindset, she did some experiments with children, and she determined that some children had a growth mindset and some children had a fixed mindset. And she said that the growth mindset child knows that they can get better at things through practice, through putting in effort, through making mistakes, and through failing. And so a growth mindset child will not be frightened to accept feedback. They'll be resilient enough to give things a go. They won't give up easily when things become too hard. And all of us want a kind of growth mindset child because it means that they will keep trying and persevering and not give up. And she compares that to a child with a fixed mindset. And the headlines many, many years ago were, "Don't call your child clever." And all the parents were alarmed. "Oh my goodness, what do you mean?" And she said, well, when you call a child clever, it gives them the impression that intelligence is innate. You're either bright or you're not. And if you've been told you're clever and then presented with a task that may be too difficult, she found that the fixed mindset child gave up, that they wouldn't do the task, because that would kind of undermine their perception of the self as being bright and clever. So the headlines were, "Don't praise your child for being clever." And the fixed mindset child, they think you're either bright or you're not. They are very competitive. So they really want to know how others are getting on. So they're overly competitive. They give up easily. They do not take feedback. Yeah. And these children plateau. And it's really interesting when you track progress through senior and secondary school. The fixed mindset child who was very bright in primary school will often be an underachiever in secondary school. And a lot of your parents listening to this will say, "Oh, yeah, my school are all over it." So many schools promote growth mindset. But it takes more than a few posters around the school saying effort is key, or don't give up, or we embrace change, or be positive about setbacks. It's an absolute nonsense. All those positive mantras and affirmations don't make a growth mindset child. Just because you say to someone effort is key doesn't mean to say they're going to make the effort. And so I find a lot of educators out there kind of really don't understand mindset. And here is the magic. In order to change a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, or encourage a growth mindset child, guess what the medicine or the antidote is? It's descriptive praise. So if we can get descriptive praise into our diet, and it's as important as nutrition, oh my God, we will ensure that we've got that growth mindset child. And we all want that child who will give things a go, who will make mistakes, pick themselves up, and not fear failure. And that's the greatest gift you can give your child.
I agree. And just unpack a little bit more there about the importance of not fear failure, because that's part of a growth mindset, isn't it?
Yeah. So lots of children fear failure, and there have been a lot of commentators saying we need to teach children to learn to fail. And I'm going, no, don't do that, because if you stand aside as a parent and let your child fail, they interpret that. The narrative they interpret is my parent doesn't love me and doesn't care enough about me. So I would never set a child up and go, "Off you go. I know you're going to fail because you haven't listened to me." So it's not about saying children need to fail in order to learn. They need to know how to cope with failure. And it's a very key difference. All your children will fail in life, no question about it, but they need to know how to cope with it. And I say they do need to learn how to deal with it, because life is full of knocks, Karis. They will fail at some point their spelling test. They will fail at some point to get into their netball team. They will fail at some point to be invited to the birthday party that they wanted to go to. And when a child, experiences failure, our job is to scaffold. And it's a really fine balance. We never want to set them up to fail, nor do we want to do the science project for them the night before. And we all know those parents who've done the science project and come in with the most beautiful, scene from Mars or Venus that the child couldn't have done, because then the child gets the sense that they can goof off and their parents is always going to rescue them. It's that really fine balance between scaffolding but not doing it for them and not rescuing. And scaffolding is all about setting up for success. It's all about being proactive. It's all about problem solving. It's about giving them the support that they can do the project themselves and feel a sense of achievement. So it is important that children know how to cope with failure. But the key thing here is, in order to cope, they need strong self-esteem. And we're back full circle again. If you want a child with strong self-esteem, the way to build up with self-esteem is through descriptive praise. So you could almost say the outcome of using descriptive praise is going to be a growth mindset plus an emotionally intelligent child who can then cope with failure and learn from the mistakes they make. And it's a beautiful, positive cycle.
Elaine, do you have any final words of advice for the listeners today?
Gosh, we've discussed so much, haven't we? I would say work with the child you've got and not the child you may want them to be. And I think it's a really important exercise to reflect on what it is that you love about your child, what excites and delights you, and that immediately will put you into a more positive space.
Lovely, Elaine. Well, that draws us to a close on the podcast here today. As you know, I had a huge list of questions that we knew we wouldn't be able to get through because we had so much to talk about. But I feel really grateful that we've covered some really key points there about a growth mindset, building self-esteem and descriptive praise. I feel there's a lot for our listeners to take away. So I just want to say a huge thank you for taking the time to sit with me today.
No problem at all. And I think your interview questions have been very clever because although none of this is scripted, I think you've very cleverly nailed two key connection and communication skills. And we've managed to discuss emotion coaching and descriptive praise. And, they are the two core skills that I encourage all parents to start with.
Absolutely. Me too. I think they are completely the two core skills that will change anybody's parenting for anybody who's listening.